In the year 2002, the vibrant neighborhood of Maplewood Heights in Chicago still held on to that unhurried rhythm, characteristic of middle-class communities where everyone knew each other. The two-story houses, each with its meticulously tended small front yard, and the cobblestone streets that gently groaned under the weight of older cars, painted a picture of serene familiarity. At the heart of this close-knit area was the corner market, and within it, Aurelio Mendoza's butcher shop, a place renowned for offering the freshest cuts of meat in the entire vicinity. My name is Mike, and at that time I was 28 years old. Along with my good friend Robert, who was 31, we had been loyal patrons of Aurelio's for over a decade. What began as a straightforward commercial transaction had, over the years, blossomed into a deep and genuine friendship. Every Saturday morning, Robert and I would make our way to Aurelio's Fine Meats, not just for the superior quality of his products, but equally for the conversations that invariably stretched well into the afternoon, becoming the most anticipated ritual of our week. Aurelio Mendoza, a man of 52, was as robust as his profession demanded, with large, calloused hands that wielded a butcher knife with the precision of a seasoned surgeon. His grizzled mustache was always impeccably trimmed, and his light brown eyes would sparkle with a particular warmth whenever he recounted stories from his past. He wore the same white apron with blue stripes, a garment perpetually stained with the marks of his trade, yet always immaculately clean at the start of each new day. It was a symbol of his dedication, a silent testament to years spent behind the counter. The butcher shop itself was nestled on the corner of Main Street and Elm Avenue, a small but inviting space that exuded a comforting, old-world charm. Its walls were adorned with calendars from bygone years, faded photographs of Aurelio with his loyal customers during various celebrations, and a framed image of the Virgin of Guadalupe that presided over the cash register, a subtle nod to his heritage. The rich, earthy scent of fresh meat mingled harmoniously with the vibrant aroma of cilantro and onions, which his wife, Carmen, sold from her adjacent produce stand. Their businesses were intertwined, much like their lives, creating a symbiotic relationship that served the community. Robert worked as a mechanic at a garage just 3 blocks away, his hands often greasy but his spirit always bright. I, on the other hand, was an accountant at a construction firm, my days filled with numbers and ledgers. Our routines had synchronized perfectly over the years. On Saturdays, after collecting our paychecks, we would invariably stop by the butcher shop. It was more than just a place to buy our weekend meat. It was our unofficial meeting point, a place where we could linger, chatting with Aurelio about everything from the latest sports scores to local politics and the general ebb and flow of life in Maplewood Heights. Aurelio had a distinctive, almost ceremonial way of cutting meat. He never rushed, each movement deliberate, precise, a testament to his mastery. As he worked, he would often share anecdotes from his youth in a small town in rural Kansas, recounting how he had arrived in Chicago at barely 20 years old, fueled by little more than a dream of owning his own business. His laughter was infectious, especially when Robert would share a particularly witty joke he'd picked up at the garage, filling the small shop with a genuine warmth that drew people in. June 15, 2002, dawned like any other Saturday. Robert and I arrived at 10 a.m., precisely as we always did, but the metal curtain of Aurelio's Fine Meats was drawn, a stark and unsettling sight. Our initial thought was that Aurelio might have overslept, or perhaps encountered an unforeseen family emergency. Carmen's produce stand was also conspicuously empty, adding to our growing unease. We waited for an hour, then 2. We inquired with the neighbors, but no one seemed to have any information. Aurelio simply hadn't opened that day, an act entirely uncharacteristic of him. In the 12 years of our friendship, we had never known him to miss a day without prior notice. His absence was a gaping hole in the fabric of our Saturday routine, a silent alarm bell ringing in our minds. The following Monday, the butcher shop remained closed, and then Tuesday, and the entire week that followed. The metal curtain stayed down, a symbol of an unsettling mystery. The first week of Aurelio's absence filled us with a profound disquiet that we struggled to comprehend or manage. Robert and I took turns driving by the butcher shop every single day, our eyes scanning the facade, desperately hoping to see that familiar metal curtain raised and to hear his booming voice call out, "Good morning, boys," just as he always did. The silence was deafening, the emptiness palpable. Carmen eventually reappeared that Wednesday, but only to collect a few items from her produce stand. When Robert approached her, his voice laced with concern, to ask about Aurelio, she merely shook her head, her eyes distant and clouded with sorrow. She mumbled something vague about family problems before quickly hailing a taxi and disappearing once more, leaving us with more questions than answers. Her hurried departure only deepened our apprehension, suggesting a truth far more complex than a simple family issue. Determined to uncover the truth, we decided to launch our own informal investigation. We spoke to Mr. Peterson, the baker from across the street, who reluctantly shared that in the early hours of that Saturday morning, he had seen lights on in the butcher shop much later than usual. This was highly uncharacteristic, as Aurelio always closed promptly at 8 p.m. Mrs. Davis, who lived in the apartment directly above the shop, mentioned hearing voices, but she had dismissed them as late-night customers, never imagining the sinister undertones. These fragmented pieces of information, though unsettling, offered no concrete leads. Days bled into weeks and weeks into months. The butcher shop remained stubbornly closed, accumulating a thick layer of dust on its windows, a silent monument to a life abruptly interrupted. Someone had eventually taped a "For Rent" sign onto the metal curtain, but even that sign began to fade and peel with the relentless passage of time, its message becoming as indistinct as the memory of Aurelio himself. Robert and I developed a melancholic routine. Every Saturday we continued to drive by the corner of Main Street and Elm Avenue, as if our bodies were incapable of breaking a habit forged over more than a decade. We bought our meat from the supermarket now, but it was never the same. The meat came prepackaged in sterile plastic, devoid of the ritualistic conversation, lacking the expert hands of Aurelio selecting the perfect cut just for us. The supermarket aisles felt cold and impersonal, a stark contrast to the warmth of Aurelio's shop. In December 2002, 6 months after Aurelio's disappearance, Robert unexpectedly encountered Kevin, Aurelio's distant cousin, at a downtown Chicago bar. The man, visibly uncomfortable and fidgety, reluctantly confided that Aurelio had been facing serious financial troubles and had decided to leave the state to start anew. When Robert pressed him for details, asking where Aurelio had gone, the cousin merely shrugged evasively and abruptly changed the subject, his discomfort palpable. That explanation, however, failed to convince us. Aurelio was a man of his word, someone who valued human connections and loyalty above all else. If he had been forced to leave, he would have told us something, even a quick farewell. It simply wasn't his style to vanish without a trace, leaving his life and his friends behind without a single word. The cousin's vague answers only fueled our suspicions, reinforcing the belief that there was more to Aurelio's disappearance than met the eye. Years passed, and the neighborhood of Maplewood Heights underwent its own slow transformation. Mr. Peterson's beloved bakery eventually became a pharmacy, a sign of changing times. The space that once housed Aurelio's butcher shop saw a succession of short-lived businesses, first a cell phone store, then a beauty salon, and finally a taco stand that closed its doors after only a few months. Each new venture that attempted to occupy that space seemed cursed to fail, as if the very walls held the lingering memory of its former owner, resisting any new identity. Robert married in 2005 and moved to a different part of the city, his life diverging from the familiar paths we once shared. I continued to live in Maplewood Heights, but our friendship, once so vibrant and constant, gradually cooled. Without Aurelio as our central meeting point, our lives naturally took different directions. We would see each other occasionally at family gatherings or neighborhood events, but that easy camaraderie, that unspoken understanding we once shared, had faded. The bond, though still present, lacked the daily nourishment it once received. In 2010, 8 years after Aurelio's disappearance, I unexpectedly ran into Carmen at the downtown city market. She looked noticeably thinner, her hair now completely white, selling flowers from a small humble stall. When she saw me, her eyes immediately welled up with tears, a silent testament to years of unspoken grief. She confessed that she had never heard from Aurelio again, that he had simply walked out that night of June 14th and never returned home. He left everything behind, she told me, her voice trembling with emotion. His clothes, his tools, even the money from the cash register. It was as if he had just stepped out to buy cigarettes and simply forgotten the way back. Her words painted a vivid, heartbreaking picture of a man who had vanished into thin air, leaving behind a void that time had failed to fill. That conversation haunted me for years. Aurelio had become a phantom presence in my life, someone who would materialize in my thoughts every time I passed the corner of Main Street and Elm Avenue, every time I bought meat, every time I heard a laugh that even remotely resembled his. His absence was a constant subtle ache, a reminder of a mystery unsolved and a friendship abruptly severed. December 2021. 19 years had now passed since Aurelio's disappearance. I was 47 years old, with streaks of gray at my temples and a life that had taken many unexpected turns. I had married, divorced, and now lived alone in an apartment near downtown Chicago. Robert and I had by then rekindled our friendship after his own divorce. Our Saturdays had once again become a time for us to meet, though now it was for breakfast at local diners, where we would reminisce about the old days, sharing stories and memories that bridged the gap of lost time. That particular Saturday, December 18th, Robert called me early with a rather unusual proposition. His younger brother, Kevin, had recently purchased a vacant lot in the Maplewood Heights neighborhood, intending to build a house there. He needed help clearing the overgrown land before the construction crew arrived on Monday. The lot was a chaotic mess of weeds, years of accumulated trash, and several large trees that desperately needed pruning. "It's just 2 blocks from where you used to live," Robert said over the phone, a hint of nostalgia in his voice. "Are you up for it? Kevin will pay us and then we can grab some beers afterward." I accepted, more out of a sense of nostalgia than for the money. It had been years since I had set foot in Maplewood Heights, and I was curious to see how the neighborhood had changed, how time had reshaped the familiar landscape of my youth. We arrived at the lot at 9 a.m. It was a rectangular plot, approximately 200 square meters, completely abandoned and neglected. The weeds reached up to our waists, bags of trash were strewn everywhere, and 3 imposing trees cast dense shadows across the land, giving it an almost eerie, forgotten feel. Kevin explained that the property had belonged to an elderly woman who had passed away without heirs, and the city had put it up for sale after years of legal red tape. We began our work by dividing the lot into sections. Robert took charge of the front portion, Kevin tackled the sides, and I headed towards the back where the largest trees stood. The work was arduous. The weeds were stubbornly entangled with rusted barbed wire and jagged pieces of sheet metal, remnants of someone's careless disposal years ago. It was a physical challenge, but the shared effort brought a sense of purpose to our morning. Around noon, as I was diligently pruning the lower branches of a large mesquite tree, something white, dangling from a high branch, caught my eye. At first, I dismissed it as a plastic bag caught by the wind, a common sight in neglected urban spaces. But as I drew closer, my heart inexplicably seized in my chest. It was an apron, a white apron with familiar blue stripes, faded and bleached by years of relentless sun and rain, yet unmistakably familiar. The sight of it sent a jolt of recognition through me, a chilling echo from a distant past. "Robert!" I yelled, my voice trembling with a mixture of disbelief and sudden overwhelming emotion. "Come here!" Robert dropped his machete and rushed over, followed closely by Kevin, who looked bewildered by my sudden urgency. The 3 of us stood there, staring upwards at that solitary garment, hanging like a ghost from the past, a silent sentinel of a forgotten story. "It can't be," Robert murmured, his voice barely a whisper, mirroring my own unspoken thoughts. Kevin, still trying to grasp the situation, retrieved a ladder from the truck. My hands trembled as I ascended, reaching for the fabric. The moment my fingers touched the worn material, I knew with absolute certainty that it was Aurelio's apron. It bore the same indelible stains I remembered, the same distinctive wear and tear in the pockets where he used to keep his small, specialized knife for cutting samples. And then, in the right pocket, I found something that sent a shiver down my spine. A small notebook, its pages damp and blurred, but with Aurelio's unmistakable handwriting still faintly visible. I descended the ladder, the apron clutched tightly in my hands. Robert reached out, touching it as if it were a sacred relic, his eyes wide with a mixture of awe and sorrow. The pages of the notebook were indeed water-damaged and smudged, but a few words were still legible. "Carmen, forgive me. No other way out." Each word was a punch to the gut, a cryptic message from a past that had suddenly, violently, resurfaced. Kevin looked at us, his expression a mixture of confusion and concern, unable to comprehend the profound significance of our discovery. To him, it was merely an old, discarded apron, But for Robert and me, it was the first tangible clue, the first real piece of evidence regarding our friend's whereabouts after nearly 2 decades of agonizing silence. "How did this get here?" Robert asked, his voice hoarse with emotion, the question hanging heavy in the air between us. I scanned the surrounding terrain with new eyes, a sudden, chilling realization dawning on me. We were exactly 6 blocks from where Aurelio's Fine Meats had once stood. The lot offered a direct, unobstructed view of the corner of Main Street and Elm Avenue. From this vantage point, Aurelio would have been able to see his business, his former life, like a distant, fading memory, a silent spectator to his own existence. The apron smelled of damp earth and lost time. As I held it, I could almost picture Aurelio, taking it off for the very last time, hanging it on that branch as if leaving an offering, a silent farewell to a life he was forced to abandon. The December wind rustled through the mesquite leaves, creating dancing shadows across our faces, adding to the surreal atmosphere of the moment. Robert and I exchanged a long, silent glance. No words needed. We both knew that this discovery would change everything, that we would have to make a profound decision about what to do with this newfound information. Should we actively search for Aurelio? Should we contact Carmen and share our findings? Or should we simply guard his secret, just as he had guarded his own for 19 long years? The weight of the choice pressed down on us, heavy and undeniable. That night, sleep eluded me. Aurelio's apron hung draped over a chair in my kitchen, a silent, unexpected guest who had arrived to stay. Robert had insisted that I keep it, claiming I had always been better at keeping secrets. But this particular secret felt like a heavy stone lodged in my chest, a burden I was not sure I could bear alone. On Sunday morning, Robert appeared at my door, carrying 2 coffees, and looking as if he hadn't slept either. We settled into my small living room, gazing at the apron in silence, as if expecting it to miraculously provide the answers we had sought for 19 agonizing years. "We have to find him," Robert finally said, his voice firm, breaking the heavy silence. "What if he doesn't want to be found?" I countered, the question a painful echo of my own doubts. What if he hung that apron there precisely as a way to say goodbye? We spent hours debating, our arguments circling the same painful points. Robert passionately argued that Aurelio deserved to know how much we had missed him, that his friendship had meant something profound to us. I, on the other hand, believed that there might have been powerful, compelling reasons for his disappearance, reasons that we had no right to judge or interfere with. The ethical dilemma weighed heavily on us. Finally, we decided on a course of action. We would seek out Carmen. We found her that Tuesday at the downtown city market, at the very same flower stall where I had seen her years ago. When she saw us approaching, carrying the apron carefully tucked inside a bag, her face transformed. The flowers she had been arranging slipped from her hands, scattering across the ground. "Where did you find it?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper, laced with a fragile hope I hadn't heard in years. We recounted the story of the vacant lot, the old mesquite tree, and the small, water-damaged notebook. Carmen listened in profound silence, tears streaming down her wrinkled cheeks, her gaze fixed on the apron as if it held all the answers. "He's alive," she finally said, her voice choked with emotion. "He lives in a small town near rural Oregon. He goes by Esteban now." The story she unfolded that afternoon, as we sat in a small diner near the market, was both simpler and far more complex than we had ever imagined. Aurelio had accumulated significant gambling debts, debts he couldn't possibly repay. Dangerous individuals had begun to threaten him, and then, more terrifyingly, they had started threatening Carmen. One night someone had given him a chilling ultimatum: 48 hours to come up with the money or something terrible would happen to his wife. Aurelio had made the most agonizing decision of his life, to disappear in order to protect her. He had secretly sold everything he could, leaving the money for Carmen to pay off the debts, and had left without a word of farewell. His silence was a deliberate act, ensuring that she could truthfully deny any knowledge of his whereabouts, thereby keeping her safe from the dangerous people he owed. "He sent me a letter 6 months later," Carmen recounted, her voice still fragile. "He explained everything, begged for my forgiveness, told me he loved me but could never return. He said it was better for me to believe he was dead." "Why did you never tell us?" Robert asked, his voice filled with a mixture of confusion and a touch of betrayal. "Because he asked me not to," she replied, her eyes meeting ours. "He said you were good men, but the fewer people who knew, the safer I would be." Her loyalty to Aurelio, even in his absence, was unwavering. Carmen gave us the address of the small town where Aurelio now lived. He worked on a farm, had adopted a new identity, and lived alone in a modest house. She visited him once a year, always with extreme caution, always making sure no one followed her, maintaining their secret connection. "Do you want to see him?" she asked, her gaze searching our faces. Robert and I exchanged a look. For 19 years we had fantasized about this very moment, but now that it was within reach, a profound fear gripped us. What would we say to him? How would he react? Did we even have the right to intrude upon the new life he had painstakingly built for himself? The weight of our long-held desire for answers clashed with the ethical implications of our potential actions. We decided to go, but with a crucial condition. We would only observe him from a distance, just enough to confirm he was well, to bring a quiet closure to our own desperate need for answers. It was a compromise, a way to respect his choice while satisfying our enduring concern. The drive to rural Oregon took 3 hours. The town was small, dusty, surrounded by vast fields of corn and wheat. Carmen led us to a modest house on the outskirts, with a small garden where chili peppers and tomatoes grew, a humble testament to a quiet, solitary life. And there he was, Aurelio, now 71 years old, his hair completely white, thinner, but unmistakably him, watering the plants in his garden. He wore a simple blue work shirt and denim pants. His movements were slower, more deliberate, but he still possessed that precise, focused demeanor we remembered from his days of cutting meat. Time had etched new lines on his face, but his essence remained. We watched him from the car for 10 long minutes. Robert wept silently beside me, tears streaming down his face, a release of years of pent-up emotion. I felt a complex mixture of relief and profound sadness, an emotional cocktail I couldn't quite process. The sight of him, alive and seemingly at peace, was both a blessing and a painful reminder of all that had been lost. Aurelio suddenly looked up towards our car. For a fleeting moment, our eyes met through the windshield. He froze, the garden hose still in his hand, as if he had just seen ghosts from his past, figures from a life he had deliberately left behind. Then he did something I will never forget. He smiled. That same warm, genuine smile we had missed for 19 years. He slowly raised his hand in a deliberate, unhurried wave, like someone bidding farewell to old friends who understood that some encounters were destined to be just that. A silent acknowledgement, a quiet confirmation that affection transcends time and distance. Robert instinctively reached for the car door, wanting to step out, to embrace him, to speak, but I gently stopped him. Aurelio had chosen his path, had painstakingly built his peace. We had found ours simply by knowing he was well, by witnessing his quiet existence. Our presence, even from a distance, was enough. We drove back to Chicago in silence, the weight of our discovery settling into a quiet understanding. That night I hung the apron in my closet alongside my work shirts, not as a burden, but as a cherished reminder. Some goodbyes don't need words, only the certainty that true love respects difficult decisions, and that some bonds, though tested by time and distance, remain unbroken. Aurelio had found his way to protect what he loved most. We had found our way to honor a friendship that time could never erase.